In the battlefield, where life and death intertwined with every sword strike, the barbarian warriors fought not just for land or wealth, but driven by beliefs and rituals deeply rooted in their cultures. To understand what truly motivated these barbarian leaders to confront the powerful Roman army, it's essential to explore the spiritual and symbolic world that guided their decisions and shaped their tactics. The barbarian leaders were not just military commanders. Many were viewed as almost sacred figures, anointed by the gods to lead their tribes. Before each battle, complex rituals were performed to invoke divine protection, seek success, and ensure the bravery of the warriors. Sacrifices, auguries, and ceremonies were common practices that connected the fighters to the spiritual world, imbuing them with an almost supernatural courage. These rituals were not mere superstitions. They were an integral part of their strategies, as they believed that the favor of the gods could alter the course of the battle. In this video, we will delve into the beliefs and rituals that motivated the barbarian leaders, exploring how these practices influenced their actions on the battlefield and their interactions with their enemies. We will uncover how the spiritual and the military intertwined in barbarian cultures, creating warriors who fought not only with ferocity, but also with an unwavering conviction that they were fulfilling a destiny ordained by the gods. Prepare to dive into a world where war was both an act of faith and strength, revealing what truly drove these leaders to confront Rome with such determination. Barbarian leaders were not just military chiefs. They occupied a much deeper and revered position within their tribes. For many barbarian peoples, especially those spreading across Germania, Britannia, and Celtic regions, a leader's power did not come solely from physical or strategic prowess on the battlefield, but from a profound spiritual connection. These leaders were often seen as chosen by the gods, with their victories and achievements interpreted as reflections of divine favor. Their rise to power was shrouded in ceremonies that linked them to the spiritual world, transforming them into sacred figures capable of guiding their tribes both in times of peace and in devastating conflicts. This sanctification of leaders was deeply symbolic. They became living bridges between the earthly and the supernatural, and their decisions were considered to be guided by divine forces. For their warriors, fighting under the command of a leader anointed by the gods meant participating in something greater than a mere battle. Every sword strike or spear thrust was seen as a physical manifestation of a destiny mapped out by higher forces. The outcome of each confrontation depended not only on military strength, but also on the blessing that the leader carried. Thus, the confidence of their armies came not just from training, but from the unshakable belief that they were being guided by the gods. The spiritual power of these leaders was reinforced by constant rituals, where they sought divine counsel before making major decisions. These rituals could involve consultations with oracles, interpretations of natural signs, or even the use of sacred objects believed to possess special powers. The practice of consulting the gods not only validated their actions, but also reinforced the collective belief that victory, or even death in battle, was part of a greater destiny. Therefore, the barbarian leader was not just a military commander. They were a symbol of protection, courage, and spiritual determination. Moreover, many barbarian leaders were also shamans or religious figures. This duality of roles further strengthened their influence over their tribes. As shamans, they had the ability to communicate directly with the spiritual world, seeking not only advice but also protection and blessings. This placed them in a unique position where their leadership was not just a political or military choice, but an almost divine role. The leader's ability to connect their tribe with the gods transformed any military campaign into a true sacred mission. Thus, the spiritual strength of barbarian leaders went far beyond strategy and brute force. They were almost mythological figures, capable of inspiring their tribes with a faith as unshakable as their swords. By being anointed by the gods, these leaders embodied the belief that war was, above all, an extension of divine will. This intimate connection with the sacred was the key that made them more than just warriors. They were spiritual heroes destined to fulfill the will of the gods. Before marching into battle, The barbarians performed a series of rituals intended to ensure protection and success. These rituals were moments of deep connection with spiritual forces and were taken with the utmost seriousness. From animal sacrifices to the recitation of sacred chants, every detail was planned to channel the favor of the gods. For the barbarians, war was not a mere earthly dispute. It was an opportunity to demonstrate bravery to the gods and earn their approval. Any sign, no matter how small, could be interpreted as an omen that would alter the course of the entire campaign. Animal sacrifice, particularly of cattle and horses, was a common practice before battle. The spilled blood symbolized the offering of vital forces to the spiritual world, and the barbarians believed that through this sacrifice, they were securing the protection of the gods. Additionally, the condition of the animal's entrails was meticulously examined by shamans, who interpreted these signs as omens of success or failure in the battle. Every movement, every cut, carried symbolic meaning, and the barbarian leaders took these interpretations into account before devising their combat strategies. The chants and dances accompanying these rituals were equally important. In the moments leading up to battle, the warriors chanted war songs, often dedicated to specific combat deities, such as the Germanic god Tyr or the Celtic Cernunnos. These chants not only served to invoke the gods, but also to unify the spirit of the army, connecting each warrior to a greater purpose. The rhythmic repetition of sacred words instilled in the warriors a courage that transcended the fear of death, transforming them into instruments of the gods. Another crucial aspect of these pre-battle rituals was the psychological preparation of the warriors. The battlefield was viewed as a stage where not only did one fight for their life, but also prove their worth before the gods and ancestors. Before each confrontation, leaders and shamans delivered fiery speeches, reminding the warriors of their sacred role in the fight. These words had the power to transform a mere man into a fearless combatant, fueled by the conviction that his destiny was already written. The tribe spirit was elevated, and victory or death became equally honorable. Finally, one of the most intense moments of these rituals was the consecration of weapons. Sword and spear blades were anointed with sacrificial blood or sacred herbs, imbuing them with spiritual powers. The warriors believed that in this way, their weapons were not just tools of war, but extensions of their faith and devotion. With each strike delivered, they felt the presence of the gods at their side, as if nature itself was bowing before the spiritual force guiding their tribe. In barbarian cultures, the belief that the outcome of a battle could be predicted or influenced by supernatural signs was deeply ingrained. Before marching to war, leaders and shamans turned to omens, interpreting signs from nature and visions provided by rituals. Each event was analyzed with great attention, as it was believed that the gods and spirits communicated through these signs, indicating the correct path to follow. Among the most common practices were reading the entrails of sacrificed animals and observing the flight of birds, practices that connected the earthly world with the divine, transforming strategic decisions into acts of faith. Animal sacrifice, in particular, was a fundamental part of this process. Cattle, horses, and even pigs were frequently offered to the gods, with the spilled blood serving as a means to appease the supernatural beings and ensure their protection. After the sacrifice, the entrails of the animals were meticulously examined by priests or shamans, who sought patterns that could reveal the outcome of the forthcoming battle. The state of the liver, for example, was considered a crucial indicator of fortune or misfortune. For the barbarians, this was a way to attune themselves with the higher forces and follow the path laid out by the gods. Another method of reading omens involved observing birds. The flight of birds was seen as a reflection of the gods' will, and their direction, behavior, or even the type of bird seen could be interpreted as positive or negative signs. If the birds flew towards the enemy army, it was considered a good omen, meaning that the gods favored the offensive. However, if they dispersed or flew in the opposite direction, the barbarian army might reconsider their attack, interpreting the phenomenon as a warning. These signs reinforced the belief that natural and spiritual forces were deeply interconnected, shaping the fate of men. In addition to animals and birds, weather phenomena were also seen as significant omens. Thunder or lightning at a crucial moment was considered a direct manifestation of divine wrath or approval. The barbarians believed that storm gods, such as Thor or Tyrannes, were directly involved in the battle, and any climatic change was a form of communication. If the storm fell upon the battlefield, it was a sign that the fight was blessed or, in some cases, cursed, depending on the shaman's interpretation. Thus, the sky, the earth, and the spirits conspired to shape the course of the war. These rituals of sacrifices and signs were much more than mere superstitions. They constituted a complex belief system that guided the barbarians in their most important decisions. For warriors and their leaders, omens provided spiritual reassurance, the certainty that they were not acting alone, but under the constant supervision of divine forces. These practices were part of a symbolic network that transcended the physical plane of war, turning each battle into a cosmic event where gods and spirits were present, shaping the fate of all involved. Among the barbarians, the relationship with nature was viewed as almost sacred. Trees, mountains, rivers, and forests were not just elements of the landscape, but home to ancestral spirits and powerful deities. This spiritual connection with nature played a fundamental role in the lives and beliefs of barbarian peoples, shaping their worldview and their decisions both in times of peace and war. When entering the battlefield, these warriors believed they were fighting with the support not only of their gods, but also of the spirits of the land, which protected their territories and guided their ancestors. Sacred groves were among the most revered sites by the barbarians. These places were considered the homes of gods and ancestral spirits, and were often the setting for religious rituals before major events like war. Ancient trees were seen as living entities that held ancient secrets and powers. For the barbarians, these trees represented the strength and longevity of their tribes. Many warriors prayed to or made offerings to these trees before marching to war, seeking the protection of the spirits residing within them. This act connected them to the past and the eternal power of nature, reinforcing the belief that the land they defended was sacred. Rivers and mountains were also symbols of great spiritual power. In some barbarian cultures, it was believed that rivers were the pathways connecting the world of the living to the world of the dead, with their flows representing the constant passage of time and the journey of souls. Mountains, on the other hand, were seen as abodes of gods or places where powerful spirits resided. These natural elements were treated with great reverence, and choosing a battlefield near a sacred mountain or river could be considered a spiritual strategy, seeking the blessing or protection of spirits to strengthen the army. Ancestors also played a central role in barbarian beliefs. It was believed that the spirits of ancestors remained close, influencing and protecting their tribes even after death. Rituals to invoke ancestral spirits were common before battles, where warriors sought guidance and strength from those who had fought and died before them. Death in combat, therefore, was seen not as an end, but as a transition to the spiritual world, where warriors would continue to protect their tribe from another plane. This perspective made barbarian fighters particularly fearless, as they believed they were honoring their ancestors with every battle. This strong connection to nature and ancestral spirits shaped both the individual actions and the strategic decisions of the barbarians. It was not just about war for survival or conquest, but a fight involving the preservation of everything sacred. In fighting for their lands, barbarian warriors believed they were defending not only their resources, but the spiritual balance of their world. It was this devotion to nature and spirits that set them apart, turning each battle into an act of reverence toward the forces they believed governed the universe. The spiritual beliefs of the barbarians not only shaped their worldview, but also directly influenced their combat strategies. For them, war was not merely a physical confrontation. It was an extension of their faith, a way to manifest the power of their gods and ancestors. Every move on the battlefield, from choosing the terrain to the exact moment to strike, was often guided by omens and the will of the gods. Thus, barbarian strategies were deeply rooted in a sacred understanding of the world, where military success depended as much on physical strength as on divine favor. Choosing the battlefield terrain was one of the most critical factors, influenced by spiritual beliefs. For the barbarians, fighting in locations considered sacred or aligned with omens increased their chances of success. Mountains, forests, and rivers carrying specific spiritual meanings were often selected as battlefields. Additionally, the barbarians believed that fighting on land where ancestral spirits dwelled or where their gods were most powerful would grant them an advantage. This use of sacred space as part of their military strategy allowed the barbarians to fight with a conviction and confidence that transcended conventional tactics. The rituals performed before battle also played a strategic role. By invoking the protection of the gods and performing sacrifices, the barbarians believed they were securing control over the invisible forces that could influence the outcome of the conflict. The unwavering faith that the gods were on their side not only boosted the warriors' morale, but also gave them a ferocity that often surprised their enemies. When faced with organized and disciplined armies, such as the Romans, the barbarians relied more on their spiritual fervor than on traditional military maneuvers. This made their tactics unpredictable, driven by the belief that they were fulfilling a divine mission. Another aspect of barbarian beliefs that impacted their strategies was their willingness to face death with courage. For the barbarians, death in battle was seen as an honor, a direct path to join the ancestors and gain immortality in the spiritual world. This made their forces incredibly resilient, even in adverse conditions. The belief that dying in battle guaranteed a place of honor in the afterlife made barbarian warriors virtually fearless, willing to fight to the end without hesitation. This psychological element profoundly affected enemy tactics, which often underestimated the fierce determination of the barbarians. Finally, barbarian leaders used their skills as shamans or spiritual figures to inspire their warriors and create strategies based on interpretations of omens. Communication with the gods and spirits was a tool that shaped the course of battles. By interpreting signs and following the directions suggested by omens, leaders created a sense of divine purpose. Their decisions were not seen as human choices, but as spiritual commands that had to be followed. This made their orders unquestionable, strengthening cohesion among the warriors and uniting the army in a cause that transcended life and death.